Hello and welcome to the next installment of the embodiyou video cast. This is a series of videos created to support you in connecting with the best of yourself through practices, through talking with teachers and other practitioners, and everybody who is focused on ways to get inward to that most authentic self. And by that I mean our wisest, most peaceful, joyful self. And I'm joined by Mary Hammerstein, who is a good friend and a beautiful teacher. And I've invited her here to talk a little bit about her practice with yoga and a class that she'll be offering on Sunday mornings on embodiyou. So Mary, I will hand it to you just to have you, invite you to just tell everybody a little bit about you as a yogi, as a teacher, and would love to hear also about your offering, your class, your Sunday morning class.
Okay. So as far as me, I come from a background of education and have always been a teacher of some sort or another. And so when I started practicing yoga, many years ago, in like probably the early 90s, it just seemed to be a natural thing. I did my first yoga teacher training, a 200-hour immersive program at the Kripalu Center. Really loved what Kripalu was teaching at that time as far as a practice that is based in compassion and based in our own beliefs and what our bodies can do. And that always appealed to me, though it was difficult to swallow at that time. I was an avid runner, a triathlete, and pretty type A and pushing myself really hard. So to learn that I didn't have to do that and that I didn't have to measure up to what I saw as the ultimate either pose or practice or whatever, it was mind changing or life changing. Definitely. After that, so what led me to that Kripalu training was just a series of really deep losses and life-changing events. Losing my mother, that was a big one. Calling off my engagement 2 weeks before the wedding, that was huge. Then I was in a car accident that left me it left me in a situation where doctors were saying I wasn't going to make it through the night. So it was about 4 years of recovery from that accident. And during that time, it always came back to yoga. And I had previously been doing yoga and practiced yoga because somebody told me to make me run faster. And so it was just so interesting to me to watch myself as I went to each doctor's appointment. When I was asked if I had more questions, my question was always, when can I do yoga again? And I don't know where that came from, but it just kept coming. And so slowly, more and more doctors, this was quite some time ago, so a lot of doctors were very reluctant to let me practice at all. But slowly, they started to give me more leeway and more permission. And I used videos, and that's the way to do it, I think, and went nice and slowly with Suzanne Deason, I think was one of them. They were the Gaia series. And then when I did that initial 200, it did change, and it committed me to my practice more, and it also sort of launched me into a different career path.
The 200-hour training, just for
the
people
200,
who aren't yogis yet.
And then I ended up like giving up my entire career and as an educator and volunteering for a year at the Kripalu Center. And so while I lived and worked at Kripalu, I had the opportunity to learn that there's so many different interpretations of yoga, so many. And I think what I really loved about being there and being in that energy was just the diversity of everything. and just seeing like the waves of people coming through. Every Sunday the programs would change, every Friday the programs would change, and just the energy of the whole building would change and shift. And so I got the chance to practice with a lot of really, like yoga luminaries and learn from them. And a lot of them would take the time to come and teach just to us, to the volunteers. There were 50 of us living and working and eating and sleeping and doing everything there. So when I left there, I felt that I had gotten a lot of different perspectives, and that it was time to go to India. So I went to India, and while I was there, I went to do a 300-hour training program that somebody had told me about, that was actually living at Kerala as well, and said, oh, you have to do this program. The teacher's amazing, all this stuff. And I just was like, I'm not looking for a teacher. I just want to go and learn about yoga at the source and find out. And really what I was looking for was to find out if what we were doing in the West had anything to do with what was going on in the East.
Yeah, you wanted to get to the roots of it.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, I wonder if they are. I've lived overseas. I've lived in Asia multiple times. I lived in Thailand, lived in the Philippines, and I've seen, I think of the example of pad thai, right? Everybody in this country eats pad thai. They don't eat it in Thailand.
Right.
So I'm like, what?
I love that.
So is this yoga thing something that's really happening over there? And so I went over, I did a 300-hour training program with my teacher over there, and listen to me, I call him my teacher, right? And so
you weren't looking for a teacher, but here we are.
I was like, no, I don't need a teacher. I'm not a guru type of person. That's not my thing. I'm on my own path. I'm figuring it out myself. And when I met him, I didn't even know it was him when I met him. I don't know. I don't remember. I do remember it vaguely. We were getting on a bus and he was telling me where to go, and I just didn't even know that he was who he is. And so
I'm gathering just from that he was maybe a little bit unassuming and kind of low key.
He is completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and cool. He's the first one that'll say, don't call me Guruji. Don't look at me like that. You need.
That sounds like my kind of teacher, like somebody who's just like, I'm a human and I know this stuff, and I'll teach it to you.
Yeah, it was a good couple weeks before I actually listened. I was raised by a hippie, so I have this sort of mistrust of authority thing that's threaded through my life. So I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, And it was also interesting to watch other people in our training program that did almost worship him and like had to be at his feet all the time and had to be, and it was just kind of like a little off-putting to me to see these people doing this. And you could always tell that he was never quite that comfortable with it either. After a couple of weeks, I started to listen and I started to pay attention. And really what he's teaching and what I teach now as a result is that it's just yoga, right? It's a practice, but really what matters is you and your connection to yourself and your comfort with yourself and your connection to your joy and your bliss. And that these practices and these techniques and this stuff that they, yes, have been doing for hundreds of years is all for that, is all to bring us in touch with ourselves and in touch with our own bliss and our own joy. And so one of the things I appreciate the most about him and about the Akhand yoga practice is the joy base to it, is that we laugh, we giggle, he cracks jokes, and it's done in a way that's not deprecating of the practice at all, and it's done.
Sounds like it holds it lightly, right?
Yeah, but it's not poking fun at anything, and it's not doing it from a place of superiority. And so I also, the most important thing I think, and the thing that I took away from that first training, that first 300-hour program that I did with him, is that there's more to yoga than just the asana. And he is also a Canadian citizen. And so he has practiced and taught in the West quite a bit too, though he grew up in ashrams in India starting at age 8. He's been studying yoga. but I really appreciate the ability that he has that a lot of other teachers I've studied with in India do not have, to appreciate the special needs, I guess, of the Western student. That there are things that are different to us and individual to us. And so that while in the West, we have this belief about yoga being just the asana.
And by
Um,
asana, just so the, the newbie to yoga or somebody who takes a class for whom, only the English language is used, asana means pose or right posture, correct?
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's just, we think of it as the physical practice, right? And that's a part of it, definitely. He calls it jumping, pumping yoga. But what we miss is the other four components. It's also a philosophical practice.
Mm-hmm.
So there's also that need to recognize the rich history and the teachings that come from so many of these valuable and sacred texts, the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, the Sutras of Patanjali, and so many modern texts too, the writings of Stephen Pope and people like that. There's so many, Eckhart Tolle, there's so much philosophy that can be sort of brought in to a practice of 90 minutes or even 60 minutes. And the point being that it needs to be recognized as not just exercise.
Mm-hmm.
There is a spiritual basis, and I feel strongly that our culture right now is spiritually bereft. We've gotten so far away, and we're so uncomfortable talking about spirituality or religion or faith or belief that we've kind of lost touch with our own faith and
What
beliefs.
I'm hearing, I want to jump in because
Yeah.
I'm kind of understanding in real time the benefit of, it's the benefit of the physical practice alongside the philosophy. So you're not just thinking
Exactly.
about philosophy, but you're like trying it on in your body through contemplating and then moving. But also the class that you'll be offering on embodiyou, it has other components as well. I'm wondering if you'll tell us about those. Yeah. And I took your class once. I think it's a similar format, and I left feeling like, wow, this is what yoga should be. And I really felt uplifted by it. So I'd love to just kind of hear the components and have other people learn about them.
Yeah, so having the poses, the asana, which you can expect in a standard yoga class. The names are a little bit different of some poses, but I always point that out.
Mm-hmm.
And the philosophy, which is definitely, and it can be a theme of just being in the moment for the class. It's not like I'm teaching a whole session on yoga philosophy. Pranayama is really important, breathing. So we use pranayama as a term to describe any time that we modify or change the breathing with a specific purpose in mind. And so there's always a lot of deep breathing, at least 1, 2, sometimes 3 different types, which I'll teach. There's a meditation component. We'll always be doing some form of seated or quiet contemplation, because that is super important. And then the part that I find that sometimes people struggle with or have a little bit of a challenge with is mantra. That I think that so many of us have gotten so out of touch with our voices that we're not comfortable using them for our own benefit. And so we will be chanting mantra, and I do teach the mantra, and there's so many benefits to chanting mantra. Just opening up like the throat chakra, opening up your voice, and having to use your brain in a way when you're forming these Sanskrit words that you're not necessarily used to, helps to develop the brain a little bit more. With mantra, there's also the belief system, the belief in Hindu philosophy that just by speaking Sanskrit words, you're worshiping and receiving benefits. So hey, why not try it, right? And breathing, right? It's still about breathing when you're coming out with, Om Triambakam Yajama. Hey, that's a breath, right? And letting it out. And there's something really beautiful about sharing all of our voices. So in a Stretch, Breathe, Connect class, or what we call a khand, which means whole, in a holistic yoga class, you'll find all 5 of those things. You'll find the asana, the poses, right? And then the pranayama, the breath work, meditation in silence, philosophy, right? and mantra. And it's not necessarily mantra like many of us know as far as singing. There's a difference between singing mantra and actually chanting mantra.
Mm.
And you know, my teacher's very, very clear on that. So the mantras that I usually use, I draw from either Patanjali's sutras or from ancient mantras that I've learned in India. And it's just a beautiful opportunity to do more, right, than just a pose, right?
And
And
I'm
sometimes the
curious,
body needs that. Sometimes the body
exactly,
wants to
yeah.
just
And
jam
so the
out 10
mantra
sun
piece,
salutations.
yeah, I don't mean to cut in. I just want to say, I did an interview with Allie, she recorded some really beautiful chants with the ukulele. So it's like this really sweet iteration of sort of singing a chant rather than chanting it,
Mm-hmm.
singing a mantra rather than chanting it. And so love to hear the difference, but also a question for the newbie who is skeptical of chanting. From what I understand, you benefit just from being in the space with it by
Mm-hmm.
listening to it. So
Oh yeah.
is there an option just to, step back and listen? Like sort of like if I went to an Episcopalian school and I was raised Jewish, and so I got a little sticker that said I could go up to the where you get communion and just get a blessing, and I did that. And so it's like you can get the blessing without having to take communion. You can get the benefit without having to actually chant. Is that true?
Precisely. And I mean, that is another reason why I so much enjoy and have committed myself to this style of yoga, actually running teacher trainings in India now and doing that sort of thing, is because there are no requirements.
Mm.
You don't have to do anything. And anytime that anybody comes in, you've probably heard me say this in classes before, you don't have to do a single thing I say, because it's your practice.
Right.
And
so
I
there's
think
a freedom element to it and a free will element to it. That's really important.
Yeah. And if you're not comfortable sticking your arm behind your head because you have an issue with your shoulder, then don't do it. Right. Just as much as if you're not comfortable belting out a couple of lines of mantra, or it just doesn't feel like the right thing for you, you don't have to do it.
Yeah. I think having the option to listen to it opens the door to participate without having to participate in a way that's uncomfortable. So I think it's really reassuring to hear that. So thank you for reminding us of that free will component. And I think all of my favorite teachers have that element of spaciousness, of the lightness that you're talking about, of the humor piece is so important to remember, that we're just like in these like meat packages wrapped around spirit and doing our best. And so that lightness kind of keeps that in mind. Yes, don't we? It's like, oh, it's so cute that you it's so cute that you do that. And like to myself, I say this too. Yeah. So I think what I also appreciate about your class is the opportunity to connect. And I will miss the tea that you bring in the in-person class.
I know, I'm trying to figure out a way to do that virtually.
I know, or maybe it's like a recipe or something, but and we all make tea beforehand. I don't know, we'll figure out that piece, but there's still the connection piece that it's hard to just create that out of thin air. And I felt like you did a really good job building a community that I hope we see.
And that connection piece in this class is something that will be stemming from the Kripalu tradition of a share circle.
Okay.
And
beautiful.
Of course, nobody's required to share. But when you do sort of get into that place of conscious communication and witness consciousness more, having other people just hear you can be really hugely powerful.
I find it's really interesting to almost hear what comes out of your mouth, and like you are able to more witness, right? And you're able to more witness yourself say it when you have a circle of people who are present and listening to you, right?
Yeah.
So that's also powerful. I just think, I said this about a meditation group, and it applies here too. It's like we all just sit around and work on being slightly better than when we came in terms of not some outside adjudication of better, but just more closely connected to like our highest, most pure self. and where that bliss lives. And so as you'll watch, when you see all these interviews, we always end up this thread coming right back to where the spirit lives. And so it was just really lovely to hear you say the same thing that other people have said in a different way. It just reinforces why I've invited you to be with me on the teacher team. So yeah, like really grateful to sit with you and connect with you and have other people learn about just the deep connection you have to the tradition of yoga, where it's practiced, you know, where it began in India, and the way you've brought it back in a really authentic way, that connects again to the deep roots of what it, you know, where it started.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And find Mary. Did we say 10 a.m. on Sundays?
10 a.m. on Sundays.
10 a.m. on Sundays. And yeah, coming soon. Thank you.
Stretch, breathe, connect.
Stretch, breathe, connect.
Namaste.
Namaste.